Hello and welcome to Lecture 8 on Psychological Disorders. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about dissociative identity disorder, and we're going to talk about the controversies around the disorder itself and the diagnosis. And then we're going to look at the 5 symptoms of schizophrenia. So in this lecture and the next 2 lectures, we're going to talk about schizophrenia. Dissociative identity disorder, also called DID, is the occurrence of 2 or more distinct identities in the same individual. Now, this used to be called multiple personality disorder, but the name was changed, and it was changed for very good reason. Our understanding of dissociative identity disorder has changed dramatically. So I want you to think of a hand mirror. Now, for most of us, when we look in the mirror, we see ourselves, and we just see one self. For those who have first I'm going to talk about the concept of multiple personality disorder and then dissociative identity disorder. So, when the diagnosis was known as multiple personality disorder, it was as if the self broke. And so it was like the mirror got dropped, and there were all these little shatters, and each shatter was a different identity, it was a different self. And so you had multiple selves, multiple personalities. Our concept of this disorder has changed. We now believe that it's not multiple personalities, it is multiple identities of the same personality. So if you imagine dropping that mirror, the mirror cracks, but it doesn't break into pieces. And so when the person looks in the mirror, they still see just one face, but it looks odd in each piece of the mirror that's been shattered or cracked. So now we believe that with dissociative identity disorder, it's not that the self becomes many people. It's that it cracks and it separates into separate identities, but those identities are still part of the whole. Now, most of those diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder are women who report being severely abused as children. It's certainly not only women who are diagnosed with DID. But men or women who report being diagnosed with DID, who are diagnosed with DID, all report a personal history of severe abuse during childhood. And this is the most severe abuse that you've heard of. It's going to include sexual abuse. Can't say that it does in 100% of DID patients, but it includes severe neglect, but lots of physical abuse, emotional abuse. These poor kids have just been literally broken. And so the self cracks. And it's actually a survival mechanism. So the theory is that children cope with this abuse by pretending it's happening to someone else. And so they dissociate. Over time, this dissociated state takes on its own identity. So during traumatic events, those who develop DID, they're dissociating during these traumatic events. They're being so severely abused and so frequently that they're dissociating a lot. And so it's as if this abuse is happening to somebody else. But their self breaks in multiple pieces. I'm sorry, it cracks in multiple ways. And so there's not multiple identities or multiple personalities. It's just there's cracks in the self. And each section that's been cracked becomes its own identity, but not personality. And I'll keep talking, and I hope that'll make more sense. Okay. Now, within this disorder, the separate identities usually differ pretty substantially. You'll have different gender identities, different sexual orientations, different ages. Some might speak foreign languages and some might not. They have different interests, psychological and physiological profiles, different patterns of brain activation. Some might have an allergy, or one might have an allergy and the rest don't. One might have diabetes, the rest don't. Sometimes what's called an alter, one of these identities, will need eyeglasses and the rest don't. Or most of them need eyeglasses, but some don't. It's a really, really fascinating. To me, this gives some credence to the validity of the disorder. It is a very controversial diagnosis. There's a show that was on Showtime probably about 10 years ago called The United States of Tara. That's T-A-R-A. And it was about a woman with dissociative identity disorder. I was really impressed with the series. They did their homework. Was it, 100% accurate? No. Dissociative identity disorder is messy. It's complex, and Hollywood doesn't get everything right. They can't. But I do think they worked really, really hard on presenting this disorder in a humane way and in a way that you could kind of relate to. I really recommend checking out the show if you're able to. Okay. So many researchers remain skeptical about whether DID is a genuine mental disorder or whether it exists at all. And I can appreciate that perspective. It is difficult sometimes to tell if a person is faking. One of the issues is that this diagnosis became more common in the 90s. It wasn't that more people had DID, it was that therapists were learning about this and weren't careful enough in working with their patients and their clients. So they would ask rather leading questions or sometimes make suggestions, not knowing that they were creating the concept of an alter that didn't exist. So there is a lot of controversy about this diagnosis. This is a rare diagnosis. It's extremely, extremely uncommon. Most of us will never meet someone with DID. Let me check my next slide. So, I mentioned how different identities will have different physiological states and abilities. Here's an example. We've got 3 DID patients right here. You can see participant 1. This is handwriting examples, each by a different alter. Same for participant 2. Each of these handwriting samples is by a different alter. And same with 3. So we see some pretty significant differences in handwriting. I personally believe DID exists. We know that children and adults dissociate during periods of extreme trauma. And, they'll sometimes say that it's like they're watching the abuse happen to someone else. Like they're watching from above. They're watching the abuse happen to themselves, but they are watching it they're separated from it. But I don't see how people, I think it's really difficult to fake alters that have different physiological states. And we can test those things objectively. But there are ways, some alters can be faked. We know that, there's typically a child alter. There's a protector who is responsible for protecting all of the alters. Let's see. And then the others are just kind of a mix of whomever that patient needs their alters to be. Okay. I'm actually running out of time to do schizophrenia, so I'm going to just tack that on the next lecture. Thank you so much.